Let's talk about Viego. The Ruined King himself is finally here as League's newest jungler. He's an incredibly interesting skirmisher, very simple and easy to understand in some ways and very complicated in others. As usual, I got together with my community to test Viego on the PvE, learning everything we can from a single play session, and then supplemented my understanding with further practice tool experiments. Remember, the purpose of this video is to be a detailed primer. I hope to share lots of useful information, but you should still only take this as your starting point to guide your own learning. Let's talk abilities. We'll start with Viego's Q, which has an active and passive component. Passively, Viego's auto attacks deal bonus % current health damage, capped against monsters. Additionally, Viego's abilities will mark all targets they hit. Basic attacking a marked target consumes the mark for a modified double attack. The first strike is a normal auto, the second deals reduced damage but heals Viego and applies full on hit effects. The double strike does proc on attack effects twice, meaning both swings count as distinct attacks for effects like Kraken Slayer or Press the Attack. Finally, Viego's active Q is a very simple, low-damage stab whose cast time is drastically reduced by attack speed. It's very intuitive to use and hits all targets it comes in contact with. Maxes first for the passive power and cooldown. Viego's W is a channeled dash that fires a stunning projectile. The channel slightly slows Viego and he can't dash over walls, but the projectile can be thrown over terrain. Longer channels increase the projectile distance and stun length, but Viego will always dash a fixed distance and do the same damage regardless of channel time. W is also a very useful auto reset and goes on a short static cooldown if interrupted. Since you only increase this ability's magic damage when you add points, I max W last. Viego's E creates a trail of mist that puts him in camouflage and increases his move speed and attack speed while he stands in it. If the shroud hits a wall, then it will travel in a wide radius around the entire wall. If Viego takes any action other than moving, his camo is broken, but he will automatically re-enter stealth after a brief delay. E deals no damage, but can be casted during any of Viego's abilities and can have its animation interrupted with no consequence. E's cooldown only starts counting down once the ability expires. Max E second to augment the buff and drastically reduce its cooldown. Viego's ultimate is a short-range, unstoppable blink that bursts down the most damage enemy champion it hits and knocks back all others. All champions hit will take a bit more than one auto attack's worth of damage and be hit by Viego's on-hit effects, but the lowest health target will also take % missing health damage and be slowed for the same duration of the ability's knockback. Viego only has displacement immunity during this ult, so although he cannot be slept or put into stasis, any stuns, roots, or similar CC will affect him after the ult finishes casting. This ability is fundamentally a simple single-target execute that's effective in teamfights, but becomes much more interesting when we factor in Viego's passive. Viego's passive causes enemy champions that die within 3 seconds of being hit by him to leave behind a ghost. Viego can target this ghost to possess an enemy, becoming them, gaining their passive, basic abilities, stats, and items. Viego is untargetable during his short channel on the ghost and heals for a percentage of the enemy's max HP. There's a lot of information to consider when becoming an enemy. Firstly, Viego becomes a near exact copy of that champion, inheriting their exact skill point distribution. The only difference is that the champion's base stats are calculated using Viego's level. Although he gains all of their items, he can't use actives or trinkets. He also keeps his own runes and summoner spells. All item cooldowns are consistent for Viego and will not be reset by becoming a different champion with the same item. No double guardian angels. Possession also has interactions with Viego's own kit. His entire Q passive still works, so his attacks still apply % current health damage and his abilities still mark enemies, though the second attack from consuming the mark no longer applies on-hit effects. While possessing an enemy, Viego gains a small move speed buff towards enemy champions. And most importantly, since Viego does not gain the enemy's ultimate, he instead gets a free cast of his own that remains available until possession ends. Casting Viego's ult will immediately end possession and revert him back to himself. Killing Viego during possession doesn't just remove him from his stolen body, it does kill him. So as you can see, Viego has simple and straightforward abilities, and some very, very complicated passives. Fortunately, combos use the simple abilities. Viego is a mostly immobile auto attacker at his core, so his combos are all about optimizing his auto attacks. This means you use W to engage if you have to get close, or as an auto reset if you're already there. W Gale Force allows you to follow your stun projectile to its maximum range. WR is a situational tool to confirm and execute on a stunned target. Generally, using any champ's CC ability to guarantee you hit your R is a useful trick. You can cancel Q with W, but this is very niche because you will lose a Q passive mark on that target, which is much of the point of casting Q. While you should optimally already be standing in your E for a combo, don't forget you can throw it out during any animation. Putting it all together, Viego wants to weave autos between his Q and W while standing in his E and finish off his target with R once he's gotten them low enough. From range, we use W auto attack, Q auto attack. Since Viego has camo and a long melee attack range, it's actually moderately practical to use auto attack, W auto attack, Q auto attack from melee range. And this is how it would look if you were to fight and burst someone with your E ready to cast. E auto, W auto, Q auto, R. Viego is a low mobility skirmisher with limited defensive tools in his base kit. His ability to fight people 1v1 is directly tied to his attack speed. This means that Viego is susceptible to invades and can struggle early in some solo lane matchups, but he's got a pretty healthy clear as long as you use a few tricks. Auto attack every marked monster, especially while doing raptors, and make sure you're only hitting walls with your E on purpose or you risk giving away your position for free. His 1v1 potential is better than expected early on when his kit is up, his objective shred is good, and his ganks are decent. Viego is good at a lot of things, but he's not great at them. This means Viego's plan is to try to scale up to his first item, because he becomes far scarier with ult and a complete attack speed item. Once he's online with ult up, Viego gets better at securing kills, which he desperately needs to succeed in a teamfight. Viego shines in mismatched fights or smaller 1v1 and 2v2 skirmishes, where it's easier for him to secure a kill without his lackluster defensive tools backfiring on him. Viego isn't actually that useful in the early stages of a pure 5v5 teamfight and needs one of two things. Either his team needs to do the heavy lifting, or he needs to create some pressure that leads to a split teamfight, putting him directly against fewer enemies. Once Viego gets a takedown and starts refreshing his ultimate though, he can snowball the back half of a teamfight very hard, because that possession heal, brief untargetability, and unstoppable ult reset creates the defensive steroid that melee ADCs need to take over fights. Viego is best against tanky compositions that can't burst him down, because the sheer amount of percent current and percent missing HP damage he has means he can just go hard on the enemy front line when he doesn't fear for his life. Additionally, Viego should be at his scariest during an objective teamfight in a space where his team established control. He's so good at taking objectives that he can keep focusing on the Dragon or Baron before his team sets up the opportunity to turn, bringing value and pressure to the team in the phases of a 5v5 where he's least effective. Runes are very straightforward, as Viego has several keystones that jump out as the best options. He stacks Conqueror almost instantaneously thanks to his Q mark combos, and procs PTA almost just as fast. This means it's also very easy to proc Electrocute or Phase Rush, though the former's damage falls off very fast for his playstyle. Assuming you're going Precision Primary, choose between Overheal and Triumph, the former covering up Viego's weaknesses a bit better, the latter making his strong resets even stronger. Your secondary page could be either Domination for healing runes, Sorcery for jungle mobility runes, or Resolve if you really need extra durability. My core page was a Conqueror Domination page that seems to work well, though Last Stand and Taste of Blood weren't as effective as they usually are for melee carries. Experiment with this as a starting point. We knew going into this that Viego's itemization would be the real puzzle to solve, as he has on-hit interactions, crit scalings, and low defensive capabilities. We identified a few good items. Obviously, Blade of the Ruined King is very effective on the Ruined King. It's almost like he was designed to work with this item or something. Then, Marksman and Spellblade mythics are both strong, the former due to his attack speed-centric kit, the latter due to his short cooldowns. This also means ability haste isn't a priority stat. Finally, Black Cleaver is situationally excellent, as just like Conqueror, Viego stacks this item very fast. We identified 3 core styles of builds. Standard Viego uses an on-hit core with some 80 fighter items, Crit Viego itemizes predominantly into marksman items, and Bruiser Viego bolsters his defenses early with a focus on Spellblade mythics. It became obvious quickly that Crit Viego deletes squishies but gets deleted right back, but then things got a bit muddy. So we crunched the numbers. Before we get into the analysis, here's what you need to know. The following combo was executed on both simulated squishy and tanky target dummies, and this combo was chosen to add bias in favor of Kraken Slayer. Some tanky targets may not have had enough max HP before 4-item tests, introducing bias away from Blade of the Ruined King. Don't forget to factor in attack speed. While big combos look enticing, Viego remains an auto-attacker. Then, we simply didn't test every possible combination of items. We were mostly looking to rule out weaker options because it's very difficult to fully optimize on day 1. Finally, Viego's ult was nerfed on PvE since collecting this data, so don't get swayed by exact numbers. Consider the main takeaways instead. Blade of the Ruined King and the Marksman mythics are all strong rush items, with the crit mythics being slightly stronger spikes, and optimal when you intend to invest heavily in crit. Second item is generally your mythic, and even with Berserker's Greaves, it becomes clear that not having an attack speed item by this point is bad. On 3-item cores, we notably start to see Bork, Kraken, Cleaver emerge as a very powerful generalist option, with Bruiser builds continuing to report good damage and pure crit bursting squishies and boasting good sustained damage. Viego spikes very hard on 4 items, excluding boots, indicating a strong late game, but my data collector reported that he stopped testing builds without Blade of the Ruined King at this point, because not having it by 4th item does lead to objectively worse damage. The last takeaway from the data is that Ravenous Hydra is worse than Titanic in Bruiser builds. It does less damage, and Viego has better sustain options, like the aforementioned Bork. Here's the ultimate results. Viego has a lot of build diversity with good on-hit, bruiser, and crit options. Blade of the Ruined King should go into every Viego build, even if you build it late. Marksman mythics do the most damage, Spellblade mythics still do good damage, but keep you alive, with Triforce being generally better for sustained damage than Divine Sunderer. While we missed a few tests, here's my thoughts. Ginzu's Rageblade didn't feel fantastic in-game, but because Viego's crit ratios don't touch his percent damages, this is definitely the pure anti-tank third item, and might even be viable after Sunderer before finishing a Bruiser build. Essence Reaver could be good for injecting Spellblade damage into crit builds. It won't remove the weaknesses of crit builds, but could be strong early. My prediction, Boar Crush into either Triforce or Kraken, followed by predominantly fighter items with HP, will be your general build. But with so many options and variables at play, you'll need to really familiarize yourself with your matchup and comp-specific items to succeed with Viego. So that's Viego, the Ruined King. He's certainly a very cool jungler who has some definite top lane counterpick potential. Practically every player in my games found him to be not only very fun to play, but also not frustrating to play against. Some of this is almost certainly because he has some evident weaknesses, and because the passive skill cap is exceptionally high and certainly not reached by anyone in our single play session. Viego has all the marks of a very popular champion. He feels extremely rewarding, and he's very attractive. And though we've been far more thorough with research and testing after our play session than usual, it's still very probable that we don't understand everything about the champion. Please experiment and report back with everything you learn about Viego to help everyone improve. And I hope I was able to help you bring the ruination to the Rift when Viego releases.